Welcome to Cozy Bedtime Stories. Are you ready to immerse yourself for the magic that's about to unfold? Let's dive straight into this magical story of Eleanor. A Cozy Autumn Story. Chapter 1. The Cottage at Ashwood Forest. Nestled on the edge of Ashwood Forest, Eleanor's stone cottage seemed to breathe in harmony with the seasons. As autumn arrived, the air turned crisp, and the forest surrounding her home transformed into a sea of gold, orange, and red. The trees stretched their branches skyward, their leaves dancing in the soft breeze like tiny flames. Eleanor had lived here for most of her life, surrounded by the stories and secrets of the forest. Her grandmother, who had raised her, always said the forest held a special magic, and while Eleanor had never seen it with her own eyes, she felt its presence in the whispers of the wind and the glow of the harvest moon. On this cool October morning, Eleanor awoke to the gentle sounds of birdsong and the rhythmic rustling of leaves. She wrapped herself in her favorite knit shawl and padded barefoot to the kitchen, where Marmalade, her orange tabby, was already waiting by the hearth. "Good morning, Marmalade," she said, kneeling to scratch behind his ears. The cat purred loudly, his golden eyes blinking up at her as if to say, "Today feels special." Eleanor smiled at the thought. It was harvest day, a beloved tradition in her small village of Willowmere. But this year, something felt different, as if the forest itself had a story to share. Chapter 2. The Harvest Feast. The morning passed in quiet preparation. Eleanor baked spiced apple bread and stirred a bubbling pot of pumpkin soup on the stove. The scent of cinnamon and nutmeg filled the cottage, blending with the faint aroma of wood smoke from the crackling fire. Outside, the golden sunlight filtered through the trees, casting dappled shadows across the garden. When the food was ready, Eleanor packed everything into a wicker basket and set off down the forest path toward the village square. The air was crisp, carrying the earthy scent of fallen leaves and pine needles. As she walked, Eleanor noticed subtle changes in the forest. The trees seemed more alive, their branches swaying as though they were greeting her. She heard the faintest sound of laughter carried on the wind, though she couldn't tell if it was real or imagined. When she reached the village, the square was bustling with activity. Tables were laden with autumnal dishes, from roasted squash to cranberry tarts. Lanterns hung from the trees, their warm glow illuminating the scene as villagers greeted one another with hugs and laughter. Chapter 3. A Whisper from the Forest. As the sun dipped below the horizon, the villagers gathered around a large bonfire at the heart of the square. This was the time for storytelling, a cherished part of the harvest feast. Eleanor's heart quickened as she realized she would be asked to share a tale, a role her grandmother had always filled with ease. When her turn came, Eleanor stepped forward, her shawl wrapped tightly around her shoulders. She began to tell the story of the Autumn Guardian, a spirit said to protect the forest and its creatures during the season of change. "The guardian is cloaked in swirling leaves," Eleanor said, her voice steady. "She moves silently through the woods, watching over all who dwell there. Those who respect the forest are blessed with abundance, but those who harm it." She paused, letting the words hang in the air. They faced the guardian's wrath. The villagers listened intently, the firelight casting flickering shadows on their faces. When Eleanor finished, a hush fell over the crowd, as though the guardian herself was listening. Chapter 4. An Unexpected Path. After the feast, Eleanor lingered to help clean up, her thoughts drifting to the story she had told. On her way back to the cottage, the forest seemed darker than before, yet not in a menacing way. It felt alive, pulsing with an energy she couldn't quite explain. Halfway down the path, Eleanor noticed a faint light flickering in the distance. It wasn't the warm glow of lanterns but something cooler, more ethereal. Curiosity pulled her off the familiar path and into the dense woods. As she ventured deeper, the light grew brighter, revealing a hidden clearing she had never seen before. At its center stood a towering oak tree, its trunk knotted with age and wisdom. Beneath its sprawling branches sat a figure cloaked in leaves that shimmered like spun gold. Chapter 5. The Autumn Guardian. Eleanor froze, her breath catching in her throat. The figure turned, and she saw a face that seemed both ancient and youthful, ever-changing like the turning of the seasons. The guardian's eyes glowed softly, reflecting the amber hues of autumn. "You told my story tonight," the guardian said, her voice like the rustle of leaves. "Few remember, and fewer still honor the forest as you do." Eleanor's voice wavered as she replied, "It was a story my grandmother told me. I never knew if it was true." The guardian smiled, a serene expression that seemed to warm the very air around her. "Truth and belief often walk hand in hand," she said. "The forest has watched you, Eleanor, as I have. Your care and respect have not gone unnoticed." The guardian reached out a hand, and a small, glowing acorn appeared in her palm. "Take this," she said. "It is a seed of the ancient woods. Plant it, and it will grow into a tree that connects the past, present, and future. It will remind you that the magic of the forest lives within you." Chapter 6. The Magical Seed. Eleanor accepted the glowing acorn with trembling hands. As she held it, she felt a warmth spread through her, as though the essence of the forest was flowing into her very soul. "Thank you," she whispered, her voice filled with awe. The guardian nodded and began to fade, her form dissolving into a swirl of golden leaves. The clearing grew still, but the warmth in Eleanor's chest remained. When she returned home, she placed the acorn in a small wooden box on her windowsill. Marmalade jumped up beside her, sniffing at the glowing seed before settling down with a contented purr. Chapter 7. A Growing Connection. In the weeks that followed, Eleanor noticed subtle changes around her. The forest seemed more vibrant, the colors richer, and the air filled with a gentle hum of life. The acorn on her windowsill glowed faintly each evening, a reminder of the guardian's gift. One day, Eleanor decided it was time to plant the seed. She chose a spot in her garden where the sunlight danced through the branches of an old maple tree. As she dug into the rich, dark soil, she felt a sense of purpose, as though she were part of something much larger than herself. When the acorn was nestled in the earth, Eleanor whispered a quiet prayer of gratitude and covered it with soil. Chapter 8. The Enchanted Tree. The acorn sprouted almost overnight, its tiny shoots unfurling with a speed that defied nature. Within days, a sapling stood where the seed had been planted, its leaves shimmering with the same iridescent glow as the guardian's cloak. Villagers began to visit Eleanor's garden, drawn by the tree's otherworldly beauty. They marveled at its golden leaves and the faint, melodic hum that seemed to emanate from its branches. Eleanor began to notice that the tree had a calming effect on everyone who visited. Children stopped squabbling, and adults spoke in hushed, reverent tones. It was as though the tree radiated peace and harmony. Chapter 9. The Forest's Gift. The story continues to grow with rich layers of enchantment and tranquil moments. The tree becomes a symbol of unity for the village, drawing them closer to the magic of the forest. Eleanor discovers more about the guardian's wisdom, uncovering secrets that deepen her connection to the natural world. Chapter 10. The Forest's Whispers. As the seasons changed, so too did the world around Eleanor. Each morning, the forest seemed to whisper secrets that only she could hear. The trees would bend their branches toward her, as though guiding her steps along the hidden paths she once thought she knew. She often wandered deep into the woods now, following invisible threads of energy that led her to the heart of the forest. One late afternoon, as the golden light of dusk painted the forest in shades of amber and lavender, Eleanor found herself in a glade she had never seen before. The air was thick with the scent of pine and damp earth, and the shadows seemed to dance as the wind rustled through the trees. In the center of the glade stood a stone well, moss-covered and ancient. As she approached it, she heard a soft, melodic voice call out from within. "Eleanor," it said, a familiar yet distant voice. "You are the keeper now." Eleanor's heart raced, but she felt no fear. It was as though the voice were an old friend, one she had always known. Without thinking, she knelt by the well, peering into its depths. The water inside shimmered, reflecting the stars that had already begun to dot the sky. "You have awakened the magic of the forest," the voice continued. "Now you must protect it, for there are forces beyond the forest that seek to destroy what has been created." Chapter 11. A Guardian's Duty. Eleanor's heart pounded as she stared into the well, her hands trembling. She had always known the forest was special, but the gravity of her role was beginning to sink in. She was no longer just a caretaker of the land, she was a guardian, a protector of the very magic that made the forest so extraordinary. "The magic is not just in the trees," the voice said again, "but in the hearts of those who care for it. The forest is alive, and it will always be with you. But remember, the balance must be maintained. Too much greed or disrespect can tip the scales." The voice fell silent, leaving Eleanor with a sense of awe and responsibility. She stood, feeling the weight of her newfound role pressing down on her shoulders. But alongside that weight was a sense of peace, as if the forest had chosen her for a reason. Eleanor returned to her cottage that evening, the evening sky turning dark and filled with twinkling stars. She knew that she had a duty, and the road ahead would not always be easy. But in the depths of her heart, she felt a deep connection to the land and the magic that had been bestowed upon her. Chapter 12. The Stranger in the Woods. One day, as the first frost of winter touched the forest floor, Eleanor ventured deeper into the woods than she ever had before. She had heard rumors of a stranger who had been seen near the edge of the forest, someone who seemed to be searching for something. She had grown accustomed to the peaceful solitude of her life, but the thought of an outsider in the sacred forest stirred something within her. Was the stranger seeking the magic? Or perhaps something more sinister? The deeper she walked, the more she felt the presence of the forest around her, as if it was watching, waiting. Finally, she reached a clearing where the trees parted to reveal a figure standing alone. The stranger was tall and cloaked in a dark hood, their face hidden beneath the shadows. "Who are you?" Eleanor asked, her voice steady but wary. The figure turned, and Eleanor was struck by the sight of their glowing eyes, like two pieces of moonlight. "I seek the heart of the forest," the stranger said softly. "The magic that lies within these woods. I was told it holds the key to a power greater than any other." Eleanor's heart skipped a beat. She knew exactly what the stranger was talking about, the power of the Autumn Guardian, the very magic she was now sworn to protect. But what did the stranger intend to do with it? "I cannot let you have it," Eleanor said firmly, her hand subconsciously resting on the glowing seed that had grown into a magnificent tree in her garden. The stranger smiled faintly. "Then you will have to stop me." Chapter 13. A Clash of Wills. The forest around them seemed to react, the wind picking up, swirling around the clearing like a storm. Eleanor could feel the ancient magic of the woods pulsing beneath her feet, urging her to stand her ground. The stranger's eyes glowed brighter, their aura shifting with a power that made the very air tremble. "I do not seek destruction," the stranger said, their voice now carrying an edge of desperation. "I seek to unlock the full potential of this magic. You do not understand what it could mean, what it could do for this world." Eleanor took a deep breath, feeling the strength of the forest flowing through her. She closed her eyes for a moment, centering herself. The forest had always whispered to her, but now it seemed to speak with one voice, urging her to protect it at all costs. "I understand," Eleanor said quietly, her eyes opening. "But this magic is not for selfish gain. It exists to preserve balance and harmony. To take it for power would be to destroy the very thing that gives it life." The stranger hesitated, and in that pause, Eleanor felt a spark of hope. Perhaps there was a way to resolve this without conflict. But before she could speak again, the stranger raised their hand, and the winds around them began to howl. Eleanor could feel the forest's resistance, but the stranger's power was strong, pressing against her in waves. Chapter 14. The Heart of the Forest. In the midst of the struggle, Eleanor's heart began to race, not with fear, but with determination. She could feel the pulse of the forest growing stronger within her, urging her to act. She reached deep into herself, drawing on the connection she had with the land. With a deep breath, Eleanor raised her hand, and the forest responded. The trees around them groaned and creaked as the ground beneath their feet shifted. Vines and roots began to twist and rise, wrapping around the stranger, not in malice, but in protection. The stranger's eyes widened in shock as they struggled against the tightening roots. You have bound me to the forest," they gasped, their voice a mix of awe and anger. "I have not bound you," Eleanor said gently, her voice calm but firm. "I have bound your intentions to the will of the forest. If you seek the magic, you must respect it. Only then can you truly understand its power." The vines released their grip slightly, enough for the stranger to breathe but not escape. Eleanor took a step closer, her eyes filled with compassion. The forest's magic cannot be harnessed for selfish desires. It is a gift to all who care for it, a gift to be shared, not hoarded. Certainly. Here are 6 more chapters, bringing the story to a complete conclusion. Chapter 15. A Choice to be Made. The stranger, still bound by the forest's will, looked into Eleanor's eyes with a mix of confusion and disbelief. "Why do you protect this magic?" they asked, their voice softer now, more curious than before. "What is it to you?" Eleanor stood still, allowing the wind to calm and the forest to settle. The roots that had encircled the stranger relaxed, though they remained as a gentle reminder of the forest's power. "Because it is not just magic," Eleanor replied, her voice steady and unwavering. "It is life itself. It is the heartbeat of every leaf, every breeze, every whisper of the trees. It is the soul of the earth that sustains us all." The stranger lowered their gaze, their brow furrowed in contemplation. "But you have so much power. You could shape the world, create anything you desire. Why not use it for your own benefit?" Eleanor smiled softly, her eyes reflecting the twilight sky. "The greatest power lies not in what we create for ourselves, but in what we protect for others." For a long moment, the stranger was silent, as if pondering the depths of Eleanor's words. The forest seemed to hold its breath, the air thick with the magic of the moment. Finally, the stranger spoke, their voice barely a whisper. "I understand." With a single motion, they lowered their hand, signaling that they no longer sought to take the forest's magic for their own. The air around them relaxed, the tension dissolving like morning fog. Chapter 16. The Forest's Blessing. Eleanor extended her hand toward the stranger, offering peace. "It's not too late to learn the ways of the forest," she said. "I can show you how to live in harmony with its magic, how to honor its gifts without taking more than you need." The stranger hesitated for a moment, then nodded, their glowing eyes dimming as they stepped forward, accepting the offer. Together, they walked deeper into the woods, the forest embracing them both in its quiet, timeless rhythm. The days that followed were filled with new lessons. Eleanor taught the stranger the ancient rituals of the forest, how to listen to the whispers of the wind, the songs of the birds, and the stories carried by the flowing streams. The stranger learned not only about the magic of the forest but also about its deeper purpose: to heal, to protect, and to nurture all who lived within it. As autumn deepened, the trees shed their golden leaves, carpeting the forest floor in a blanket of warmth and color. The stranger began to understand the true power of the forest, not the ability to command, but the wisdom to coexist. Chapter 17. The Winter's Touch. As the first snows began to fall, Eleanor and the stranger found themselves at the edge of the forest, watching as the white blanket covered the land. The world seemed to slow down, the sounds of the forest muffled by the snow. "This is the season of rest," Eleanor explained, her voice calm and serene as she gazed out at the pristine landscape. "Winter is a time of quiet reflection, when the earth recharges and prepares for the rebirth of spring." The stranger nodded, their eyes following the swirling snowflakes that danced in the air. "I never understood the importance of rest before," they admitted. "I thought power came from always moving, always striving." Eleanor smiled, the gentle snowflakes dusting her hair. "True power lies in balance. To act without rest, to give without receiving, is to invite chaos. Only when we find harmony within ourselves and with the world around us can we truly thrive." As the sun dipped below the horizon, casting a soft pink glow over the snow, Eleanor and the stranger stood together, knowing that the lessons of the forest would stay with them forever. Chapter 18. A Guardian's Heart. Months passed, and the stranger became a part of the forest, their connection to its magic growing stronger each day. Eleanor had shown them the beauty of simplicity, the joy of watching the leaves fall, the peace of listening to the rain, the quiet satisfaction of working with the rhythms of the earth rather than against them. One evening, as the first signs of spring appeared on the horizon, Eleanor stood in the center of the glade where it had all begun. The well, once ancient and still, now sparkled with new life, reflecting the brightness of the stars. The stranger approached her, their eyes filled with gratitude. "I can never thank you enough," they said. "You showed me a different way to live, a way that honors the magic of the world rather than tries to control it." Eleanor nodded, her heart light. "You've learned the most important lesson of all. The forest will always be here, as long as we care for it. And now, you are one of its guardians, too." The stranger smiled, their face no longer shrouded in mystery but bathed in the warmth of understanding. Together, they stood beneath the stars, feeling the pulse of the earth beneath their feet, knowing that the forest was safe once more. Chapter 19. The Last Leaf. As the seasons changed again, Eleanor and the stranger, now a true guardian of the forest, watched the trees shift from the pale greens of spring to the rich reds and oranges of autumn. The forest was alive with color, its beauty a reflection of the harmony that had been restored. One day, as they walked through the forest, Eleanor noticed a single leaf hanging from the oldest tree in the glade. It was the last leaf of autumn, a brilliant shade of red, shining like a beacon against the backdrop of fading golds and browns. The leaf trembled in the breeze, but it refused to fall. "The last leaf of autumn," Eleanor said softly, reaching out to touch it. "It holds the wisdom of the season, the lessons learned, and the hope for the future." The stranger stood beside her, their eyes reflecting the glow of the tree. "It is a symbol of endurance," they said, their voice gentle. "No matter how harsh the winds, it holds on, knowing that in time, the seasons will change, and it will be reborn." Eleanor smiled, watching as the leaf finally let go, fluttering gently to the ground. The forest had taught her many things, but perhaps the most important lesson was that change was inevitable. But like the leaf, she would endure, knowing that each season brought with it a new chance to grow. Chapter 20. A New Beginning. As winter settled in once again, Eleanor stood at the edge of the forest, watching the snowflakes fall gently from the sky. The world was quiet, peaceful, as if the earth itself were holding its breath, awaiting the arrival of spring. Beside her, the stranger, now a true friend, stood, their eyes reflecting the beauty of the world around them. "We've come a long way," Eleanor said, her voice soft and full of contentment. "The forest is safe. The magic is protected. And now, we wait for the next season, the next cycle of life to begin." The stranger nodded, their gaze focused on the horizon. "It feels right," they said. "The forest feels at peace. And so do I." Together, they turned and walked back into the woods, the whispers of the trees singing a lullaby of rest and renewal. The magic of the forest was no longer a secret to be hidden away. It was a gift to be shared with those who truly understood its power. And so, as the last remnants of autumn faded into winter, Eleanor and the stranger stood united, knowing that their journey was far from over. The magic of the forest would live on through them, and the seasons would continue to turn, forever bringing new beginnings.